Well, I'm going to assume they can, yeah, oh, there we go. Sound is good from Rob to everyone. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Rob. Okay, so we'll get rolling here tonight. So as Teresa's mentioned, tonight we're going to discuss the 2025-2029 financial plan for Nakusp and Area K. And so the agenda, we're going to give a bit of an overview of regional district and how the services model works, talk a bit about property assessments and how they impact the budget, an overall 2025 overall outlook, do a service by service discussion, and then some pie charts showing the estimated taxation and how the services break out by area depending where you live in the Nakusp or Area K. Okay. So just a reminder, this is a draft budget subject to change. So the budget process started last October. This is the third draft. The first one came out about 3 weeks ago. So the finance team, as well as staff, committee, commission directors, and the board level reviews are still continuing. So as well as these public information sessions. So we'll likely have another draft prior to the March board meeting. Budget review process, it happens at various levels. At the board level, the first the special budget meeting, or all-day meeting on February 21st, where we discuss numerous services and the budget overall. Literally, I don't know, probably a dozen committee and commission meetings have occurred and are continuing to occur. Local service committees we have one in Preston, Caslow. Preston's meeting this Thursday. They'll be discussing budget items, and then as well as directors, participants, depending on the service for other items. So what the steps after that is on March 20th at the regular board meeting will be the board's last opportunity to discuss the budget, suggest any changes, and adopt the budget then, as we have to submit it to the provincial government by March 31st. Okay, just before I continue, this presentation will be available online tomorrow under the web page for this meeting. So if you go to the RDCK website, to the calendar, click on March 4th, and this meeting, then we'll have this presentation available there. So a bit about regional districts. So RDCK is one of the 27 regional districts in BC. It is made up of 11 rural electoral areas, A to K. So K is the big blue one around the cusp and west of the cusp, and going down to Edgewood and I believe Galena Bay, or a little further to Galena Bay. Yeah, on that north side. Not quite Galena. Okay, close. So 10 member municipalities, of which Nakusp is one. So there's 186 services, including parks and rec facilities, rural fire protection, emergency management, resource recovery and waste, building inspection, planning, GIS bylaw, and transit. A key note about the regional district is each service stands on its own. It has its own budget, its own funding, its own accounting, its own reserves. So if there's a surplus in one reserve, we can't transfer that by law. We can't transfer that reserve to another service. So that's probably one of the larger differences between a municipality and a regional district. The municipality has the ability to have sort of common reserve funds and be able to shift funding from one type of service to the other. The regional district doesn't, just because a different set of taxpayers almost pays into each service. So we'll have a service here for instance, this arena. and it's made up of Area K and Nakusp that pay into that arena. So it wouldn't make sense if this arena had a surplus that we could take that money and transfer it to Casper. That just wouldn't be fair, and that's so the provincial government says no transfer between services, because then you're transferring money between unrelated taxpayers. Sure.
Point two as well, Teresa, that those, when it says 186 services, that's the entire regional district. Nakusp and Area K only have a very small portion of services.
Yeah, good point. Yes.
Also, you said Area K in the village, and that's for the arena, but it's only a certain defined.
Right. Yes. Defined. Yeah, and we'll get into that. Area K. We'll talk about defined areas next from that. So, regional district, 298 full-time equivalent employees, 280 volunteer firefighters, 62,500 residents, and 22,000 square kilometers. A bit about the provincial regulations that impact the RDCK. The two biggies, or the big ones, are the Local Government Act and Community Charter. They're circled in red there. They regulate a lot of what we do around financing, bylaws, services. So that's the two main pieces of legislation, and then the other regulations there, acts, regulate a lot of the services we provide. For instance, the Environmental Management Act regulates our waste recovery services. Building Act is part of our building inspection services, and so on. Emergency and Disaster Management Act is a new act that basically not only regulates but describes what level emergency disaster management we need to provide and how we do that. So how are annual property taxes for regional district services and properties calculated? So the tax requisition required to fund each service is determined through the budget process. We do a budget process for each service, figure out the expenses are, the capital required, if there's any borrowing, and then the number that balances all out is the tax requisition. So the tax requisition to fund each service is calculated, and completely separate from that, the provincial government agency, the BC Assessment Authority, assesses all the property values. So the regional district doesn't have anything to do with that, or the appeals, or any disputes involving property values. And we also do not look at, property assessment went up 10%. We can increase taxation by 10. That is not the way that budgets are done. It's done on what funding is required to fund the service. So the tax rate, then you get a tax rate for each service. You divide the tax requisition by the amount of assessments, and then you multiply that by the assessed value of each individual property, and you'll get the property tax for each individual property for each service. So going back to that model of each service having its own accounting, I'll show you a table soon that you'll get, as a resident, a different tax rate for almost every different service you participate in. And I'll show that shortly. Okay, so this graph shows the annual assessment change. The blue bars are year over year, so from 2024 to 2025. As we can see there, Area K had the largest increase, almost 11% in assessment values of all the other areas and municipalities in the regional district, and Nakusp had the fourth largest. So the blue is year over year. The orange is the 9-year average. So as you can see, the 9-year average is a much tighter distribution, about a 4% difference versus a 17% difference for the blue. So over this 9-year average. There's a bit of a reversion to a mean. And as you can see, Spokane on a 9-year average has really increased the most, but this year they've actually had a drop in their assessment values. Okay, don't expect you to read these, but I'll show you these in greater detail. Oh, sorry, what's that?
I said that was clear as mud.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's all right, keep going.
Good question. Yeah, so area K assessment values went up the most.
Just our assessment values on our properties.
Yeah.
But, question, I'll be quick.
Sure.
When did the RDCK come into effect? What year was it?
65, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So keep going and I'll stash the question.
Okay, awesome. Okay. So the latest drafted financial plan is available on the RDCK website under Administration and Financial Statements. So the three key components, and I'll show these larger so you can actually see them, is the taxation details by area municipality. So that shows all the taxation by service over a 3-year period changes. And then there's an assessment summary that shows the taxation effects for each area municipality, so you can compare those. And then there's roughly 200 detailed service statements, which show all the account details, and actually 6 years of budgets for each service. So if you really want to get into details, that's available in the financial plan. I've got a copy, printed copy of it here. There it is. It's about that thick. If you print on one-sided. Okay. And as we've mentioned previously, not everybody participates in each service. If we'll go, I think, to the next slide. So this is for area K. So this is on the left-hand side is the list of all the services that area K participates in. The top parts, so above the middle, are the services that every property in the area K pays into. So you can see the assessment value of 82 million. It's actually more than that, but that's an adjusted assessment value. So it's the same for all those services on the top. And then on the bottom are about a dozen services that only certain parts of Area K pay into, depending where you live. So not everybody in Area K pays into the fire protection service or into the arena. Or, for instance, some of the smaller ones like the Edgewood Legion Hall. So that one, just residents in that area pay into. So this shows the changes 23, 24, 25. The total requisition amount, as well as the rate per thousand. And this is available in the financial plan, as well as when this presentation gets posted tomorrow. So here's the village of Nakusp. The regional district services that the village of Nakusp taxpayers pay into. So a smaller list, and it was very similar, 23 to 25, and the rates per thousand. As you can see, they're different for each service. And I'll go through most of these services later on in a little bit more detail. But a quick scan through, you can see that the largest service by far is the S223, which is the arena, which is shared with Area K, and then Transit 85 next, Waste, and the library are two of the other larger services.
Yeah, can I just add?
Sure.
So for those of you that live in the village, then just understanding that though these show up on your tax bill under RDCK, some of these are village-owned and operated services that the tax roll has to go through Area K, so that the Area K has to go through regional districts, so that the Area K residents can provide financial aid for the services that you have right here that are your own services in the village. So, such as the arena, the historical archives, the museum, cemetery,
Library.
the library.
They're all the same, almost.
The same in which way? Oh, that assessment is the assessment value, so that's all the same. You have to look at the middle column. That's the dollars total dollars that Nakusp property owners pay into. So again, 254,000 for the arena is the largest. Is the largest one.
Okay.
And so when you get your tax bill from the village of Nakusp, I believe it's one line for RDCK services. You're not going to see this breakout.
Okay.
So this breakout's available on the RDCK financial plan, as well as this presentation. Yes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it doesn't break it out, like, I like the RDCK one, it does break it all out.
Mm-hmm.
But just looking at the, for the village in the cusp, if you have a $500,000 home for the arena, it'd be about $260. Is that about right? Tax rate, but the rate?
500, yeah, that's about right. And we'll see a chart later. There'll be a pie chart later on that will show that a little more clearly.
Can you also see the change in percentage? What was the prior year for certain items? You mentioned the arena, so let's go with the arena, for example. So we are paying 253 this year. We were paying 248 last year.
Yeah, 248.
So what was the change in percent?
Yeah, so this doesn't have it. So that's about $5,000 over 200. So that's what is that? Yeah, just over 2%. You can see the overall total change per percent at the bottom, which is 8.2. You can see the change per rate per thousand. But yeah, no, it's a good question. I think some other people have asked to see the rate per thousand change, and we'll look at incorporating it in a future version of the plan.
Then you can see, like, what items actually got the most expensive over the year, right?
Assessment change percentage. Details page. Okay. We'll see if we can fit in that in there. There'll be 2 more columns. Not totally out of line. Yes, go ahead.
Just, my understanding is Coop West is a kind of a tourism.
Transit.
Sorry?
Coop West is transit.
Oh, is that transit? Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, 239 is a transit service that covers most of the western part of the regional district. So Nelson, Castlegar, Caslow, Nakusp, and the surrounding electoral areas.
Okay, thank you.
And I will talk about transit later on. Okay, we're good?
Have we seen an increase in the library, museum?
Yes, and I'll show that later on this one. Okay, so this is an example of what a rural property tax looks like. So regional district doesn't send out the tax bills. The province does that for all the regional districts. So we send them our financial plan, and then they send rural residents the tax bills based on that financial plan. So what you would see on a tax bill, there's going to be one line. In this case, it says F Central Kootenay, so I think it'll say K Central Kootenay for K residents. And that large line will be all the services that everybody in K pays into. And then if you live in an address that pays into some of those defined area services, those will be listed separately on your tax bill. So besides those regional district services, then you've got your school taxes, the hospital taxes, and then a few other charges, including provincial rural tax that the province levies. Okay, here's that summary page I was talking about before. So on the left-hand side, well, on the far left, we list all the electoral areas, and the municipalities are listed. And then the first couple columns are the change in assessment from value from 25 to 24. So again, we see that K has the largest by a fair amount, by a couple percent, so 10.5%. Nakusp is about 7.5. The regional district as a whole is 5.2. So that means that, for instance, services, general admin, residents, Village and Nakusp and K are going to pay a slightly smaller slightly larger share than others will, because there's been a bit of a shift in assessment. But anyway, getting to the change in taxation, so we have the total taxation for each area for 25 and 24, the gross change, and then on the far right-hand side is the net change. So that's going to be the average expected change, in this case, increase in tax bills for Area K and the Nakusp for regional district taxation. So Area K is 9.7, Village and Nakusp is 6.9%. The overall average for the regional district as a whole is 6.5. So Nakusp falls about on average. Area K is larger. A bit of that is driven by having an increase in assessments and picking up a larger share of some taxes, including, for instance, the arena, that's based on assessed values. So there's been a bit of a shift. So Area K residents are going to be paying a slightly larger share of the arena as compared to the arena service as Nakusp did last year. Okay, 2025 overall outlook. As I mentioned before, the average tax increase is 6.5% for the regional district as a whole in the current budget. So that's lower than many other regional districts' financial plans, but of course theirs are subject to change. And there are some that are lower. There's some regional districts that are in the 2 to 3% range, and then there's some that are above 10. So the RDCK is slightly, I would say, is a bit below average. So the $45.8 million of tax requisitions for 2025 are actually $700,000 lower than what we forecast them to be last year. So the financial plan includes a CPI, or consumer price index increase of 3.3% for salaries and director stipends. We effectively use a 2-year average on CPI. Decreasing interest rates are reducing some interest charges on short-term loans, but they're also reducing investment income and reserves. And one of the big initiatives we've been working on the last year and has been the formalizing an asset management plan. So we had a consultant do a review last year, come up with a roadmap. So an asset management plan, it's a growing requirement for our external grant streams, particularly Community Works. So Community Works is a federal government grant based on gas taxes that all municipalities in Canada qualify for. And so the regional district shares about $1.5 million each year. So they're basically saying, you want your $1.5 million, you need to have a formal asset management plan and a better roadmap. So as part of that, the recommendation was we have a dedicated asset management specialist position. So the board approved that position 2 weeks ago. So we're expecting that position to start in July.
Have you allocated costs for that?
Yes.
$130,000.
Yes, it's in the budget.
For,
Yeah.
is it related to this position?
Yeah, it's in this plan. So we got about half of that in this year's budget because we don't, by the time we recruit and hire, the person probably starts in June, and then it'll be in there in future years. So currently this position sits in S100, which is the general admin service. And by the end of the year, we're going to come up with a allocation formula to allocate that out to the services that actually have the most assets. And so then this person will be in a position to say, this is where my work's going to go. And then we will allocate starting next year, allocate those wages primarily to rec facilities, some of our waste management services, fire halls, or any other water utilities, any other services where we have a larger portion of assets.
I might be a strange question.
No strange question.
Doesn't care. I don't
Yeah.
care. How long are they employed?
It's a permanent position. So it's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing position. So
Every year we'd be paying them how much?
130.
So that's the 130,000 includes benefits.
That's pretty good pay.
Yeah, so the actual salary is about somewhere between 85 and 90. So the 130 includes their benefits. So we fully cost positions when we approve them. So they need a computer, they need potentially a cell phone, somebody's going to supervise them. So we don't want to say, oh, it's only going to cost 90. Each new employee basically got to add 50% on top is the cost of hiring somebody. So we are choose to be a little more transparent and make decisions based on a full cost rather than just a salary. Okay. So 2025 challenges and opportunities. As everybody, I assume everybody in this room is aware of, lots of news lately about foreign trade issues, including tariffs and counter tariffs. If you read the news, it's enough to make your head spin. So anyway, increasing procurement costs potentially, slowing economic activity could lead to lower building permit, waste disposal, and recreation fee revenue if it affects that. And a more severe economic downturn could have a wider effect. So as much as possible, we're monitoring the situation, seeing what advice and the province is giving out. And again, it's basically changing on a day-to-day basis. It's very difficult today to say, oh, this is going to happen, so we need to do that, but we're preparing to, if need be, make shifts and adjustments as we go through this period of uncertainty. So fluctuating Canadian dollar, we've seen it go up and down. I don't know where it's at today, but it went down, came back up a few weeks ago. That can definitely impact our procurement costs. New federal government, I think we have to have an election by October 20th. So sometime in the next year, we'll likely have a new federal government. That's difficult to say what impact that'll have on the regional district. And another thing that's in the news, with a lot of hype, some deserved and not some deserved right now, is artificial intelligence. So that technology is evolving very quickly. So we are currently seeing some limited, although successful use at the regional district for doing things like writing reports or even job descriptions and things like that. So we need to be mindful of accuracy and privacy concerns regarding that, and we're working on an AI strategy, including some staff training components.
Oh, you're going to see a decrease in employees because of AI.
It's a good question, and depending who you talk to, that might be a couple of years out, 3 years out, 5. I think my personal take, not the regional districts, like somewhere between 5 and 10 years, things are going to be quite a bit different than they are today. I don't expect AI. Like I said, we're seeing a few hours here and a few hours there. But it'll be interesting to see where things come in the next few years for sure.
And just a comment, AI writing reports, isn't that good for our heads to do our own writing of reports?
It is, except there was one example where something had to be done the next day, and somebody had 20 other things to do. And this report needed 10 hours of work. We said, oh, I don't know if I can get this done. So we go to AI and say, okay, rough it out. Here's the situation. Give me a rough draft. And you get a rough draft, and you're like, holy smokes, that saved me maybe 5 hours of work.
But what was the cost to do that switch over? Can you figure that out?
Well, the cost of the AI tools we use right now, we don't pay for it. But 5 hours, and now it's not only to save time, but now you have this a report done that's on time, and you save some issues. And then you're right, you're perfectly right. That it requires human involvement to check it. And so, that expertise. And there are a couple of things it missed. And you look at it and say, oh, it missed that thing, but what did it do an excellent job on about 80% of it? So you add a couple things, you've got your framework for a report, and maybe you spend another hour, finishing it up yourself, and you've got, maybe you spent an hour and a half on something that would have taken you the better part of the day. So does that happen every week? No, I'm just talking about one example.
Occasion.
Occasion, yeah.
So you did mention sort of the political environment, and specifically with federal government. And one thing that seems very strongly that will disappear will be the carbon tax. So my understanding of the homeowner granting, forgive me, correct me if I'm wrong in this, but that homeowner grant is supported by BC's application of some form of carbon taxing. So if that happens in BC, have you guys looked at that and thought about what would happen if that homeowner grant is reduced or removed?
So we don't, we're not involved in setting up the homeowner grant. So we haven't looked into it. And I'm personally not aware of that. You would think there would be a shift if it was tied to it and now it's gone. So I'm not sure what the province is going to do regarding it.
Yeah, no, and it's not a fair question. If you had any insight.
I know no insight from me. It's somebody else. Yes, question.
Yeah, this is more operational, but they're talking about closing the landfill here and trucking with all the turmoil and stuff, higher costs and that. I did talk to somebody, and I can't remember exactly, and they were saying there's still room there. So I would imagine your waste management people are taking a look at it. Can we extend that a little past the time rather than having these trucks hauling garbage all the way down to Castle Garden somewhere, wear and tear on trucks, fuel, all of this sort of stuff? Would that not be a lot bigger cost than dealing with if there is more space? Like, I haven't seen anything.
So I'll have a slide about waste management. As far as from what I know, that closure plan is still proceeding because it's part of our waste management plan. So, but I'll talk a bit about it. It's really, really, really expensive to run a landfill per regulation and to close it. So it's not necessarily expensive to go dig a hole and put it in the ground. It's about monitoring it and closing it that becomes really expensive, and it becomes a long-term cost. So you not only have to operate it, it's the long-term costs of closing a landfill, an operating landfill, that have substantial impact. And I'll have a slide where we talk a little bit about.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So. Okay. All right, so we'll go through some of the services. So Service S100 is general administration. So all regional, rural areas and municipalities pay into this. So this includes corporate admin, finance, IT, human resources, CEO, and the municipal directors. So this service is looking at an 8% taxation increase in 2025. One of the capital projects in the service. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you've got general administration S101 below that.
Thank you for catching that.
S100.
S100. I will fix that. You're the first one in 4 meetings. I noticed that. Good. $138,000 roofing replacement at the office. So from an HR perspective, a couple 3 years ago, it was very hard to recruit employees. We didn't get many applicants. So the number of applications has certainly gone up for the positions. The challenges now is housing availability and affordability. And for people from out of the area to move into the area for some of our positions, it's becoming a challenge. And there's also now higher expectation for wages and compensation. So the inflationary increases in the tight labor market over the last few years has really increased sort of wage expectations. So a few IT projects migrating to SharePoint, which is an online file storage system for records management, migrating to Microsoft 365, cybersecurity resiliency. It's an ongoing threat, even for local governments, seem to be a target. New website is launching very soon. Expect announcement any day on that. And then an organizational review process, the board approved that, is going to commence this year.
One question.
Yes.
How many work out of the Nelson district?
This office or Nelson itself? Let's say about 120 roundabouts there. But we are in a hybrid work environment as well. So most of the employees have an option to work from home and come in the office a few days a week. So when I say 120, that probably includes people who live anywhere from Castlegar, up the valley, through Nelson, probably as far north as almost Ainsworth and down to Salmo. So that's the sort of the catchment area for the people, staff who work at the Nelson office. Okay, any other questions on this S100?
I'm just curious, who does the review process?
It'll be a third party, so.
Extra hire on again?
No, it's gonna be a contractor, on a contract basis. So we will have to go out to bid, to public bid, and, there's a number of consultants in Oregon, that do this in Western Canada. So we'll go to bid and, make a selection based on their proposals, and then they'll start that review this year. So rural admin, the service S101. So 25% taxation increase in 2025. This service includes regional fire services overhead, so oversight and coordination of 21 RDCK fire protection services. Most of the costs are actually allocated out to the 21 fire protection services. And we receive a substantial amount of training grant money from UBCM. We're expecting that again this year. We haven't confirmed that yet. The other major component in this service, and probably the largest from a requisition perspective, is bylaw enforcement. So this includes noise, animal control, unsightly nuisance property zoning, soil removal deposit, bylaw enforcement. And then the bylaws vary by electoral area. So some bylaw, each area will have its own set of bylaws that apply to it. Not all areas have, for instance, animal control.
That's a lot. Aren't people excited about that? 25%?
Yeah, it is a lot. So we had in prior years we had some surplus that was reducing taxes. When that surplus goes away, this is the a philosophical argument discussion that comes up to the board. Oh, we have some surplus. Use it to reduce taxes. Once you do that, then you get like sort of the double effect. Once that surplus isn't there, or same if you use reserves to reduce taxes. So that's a large part. That's what's happening here.
You have to be very careful.
Yeah. So, or you recognize that you know. The other way is give that surplus back and fight the bullet next year. So, did you have a question?
Just you commented that not all of the areas have the same bylaws or stipulations. What about the unsightly nuisance properties? Is that a fairly blanket approach across the RDCK, or?
Good
Good question.
question.
I don't know. I know it does apply in Area K.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
We have that bylaw, so it's just depending on whatever area has that particular bylaw. A lot of the areas do have that bylaw.
I think so.
But it's probably one of the toughest enforcements that you can have to deal with. So
It takes a bit of work for sure. Yeah. Bylaw enforcement in general is a challenging thing to do.
So this is just mostly rural, it's not, but nothing to do with Nakusp, right?
You're right, yeah. So this is just area K here.
Yeah, and when you talk about 21 fire protection services, Nakusp, New Denver, Silverton aren't in this, right?
No.
So is there any others other than ours that don't join this service?
Any other?
Fire protection services?
Well, I should back up a bit about that. So no, that one is part of this because our fire department's actually, our regional fire staff is actually responsible for overseeing those budgets and those contracts. So the Nakusp Area K contract does get a small charge from this rural service.
For operating the,
Well, not operating, overseeing the contract. Yeah. Yeah. Versus a full fire department like they have for in the Slocan Valley will get a much larger share of regional overhead.
so is there any funding for training for this department here?
No, because it's not a RDCK fire department.
So what would it cost for our community to join with the other ones? What would it cost?
So for UBCM, so
No, we're in the past. And New Denver say they no longer going to go with our own way right now. We're going to join the RDCK. What would it cost?
to become an RDCK fire department,
More.
Or you can get a lot more training.
you get more training as long as this grant here is available. So you have a sort of a shared regional coordination regarding training and management. But this training grant is not a certainty every year.
Right.
Yeah.
But like, K pays towards Nakusp Fire Department, because Nakusp covers at least some of K, right?
Yes. Yes.
So shouldn't they get a portion of that percentage for training?
That training grant, when we apply for the training grant, it's specific to departments that are regional fire staff look after. So they don't, our regional fire staff do not come to the Nakusp office and, provide any training or provide any oversight. So we can't, it's basically, Nakusp looks after all of that for their own department. So we have a similar setup in Creston as we do in Nakusp. Creston looks after 3 regional districts. It's actually even more different there. We have a contract with Creston. Creston looks after 3 fire halls that are regional district fire halls. None of this training dollars goes to those fire halls. It only goes to fire halls that the regional district actually manages.
So I keep coming back. Prior to all this, about 3 or 4 years ago, our fire chief was getting 3 days a week from the RDCK for emergency management, which helped our costs here. Now that's all taken away. So now it's absorbed by the village. So I'm saying, what would it cost to say, okay, we're going to start, can we keep going this way? Can we join?
I would have that discussion with CEO Horn and our regional fire chief, but it would certainly start at the CEO level.
And I believe if you join, you ought to get paid on each call, volunteers. This 21 fire protection service.
Yeah, so our model is that volunteers do get paid for every call. They also get paid for training. So the wage cost for regional district managed fire halls has increased substantially over the last 10 or 15 years because not only getting paid, but sort of the increased requirements of training. I mean, 30 years ago, you went to a meeting, did a little bit of training twice a month. Now it's once every week and maybe a weekend every month or 2.
Because right now, they're looking at first aid courses that take
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Mhm.
Where they find the time to do that?
Mhm.
Well, it's getting harder.
Yeah.
More and more training.
Yeah,
They're bringing them.
yeah, more training,
They're 24/7.
more paperwork,
Our chiefs are burning out too.
lots of administrative stuff. You have to track all the training now. Yeah, it's certainly become, a bigger thing to manage than it has been.
Would that require a referendum for us to, I almost think it would, because it would have to be considered a new service.
I would say so, but sorry, I would speculate so.
Yes.
So, yeah, yeah, no, I think it's something to look into, then, yeah, that would be, would start, that discussion would start at the CEO level. Okay, move on to the next one. So GIS Service S102, Geospatial Information System. So this provides regional mapping services for internal and external uses, including the public web map, which is available on the RDCK website or through it. It also, the service does landfill measurements and mapping for fire services and emergency services, including mapping of evacuation alerts and orders. So on that map on the right-hand side was the evacuation order area for the Argenta fire last year. So it's seeing a 3% taxation increase in 2025. There's a strategic assessment underway. I think that's almost complete. Some funding for upgrading the software system, some hardware required, an RTK unit, and as well continued work, some grant funding for work on the next generation 911 project. So next generation 911 is basically moving from analog to digital system. So somewhere down the road, you could use your smartphone and text and maybe send pictures and do those sort of things. So that's coming. I think I just read the news yesterday that the federal government has given an extension for when we need to be ready for that. I think it's 2027 now, but anyway, we're doing work to get there.
May I just ask, please, what's the strategic assessment underway? What it means, like what's the strategic assessment in GIS?
Because GIS, there's a lot of potential in GIS to provide and add value in a whole bunch of different ways. Once you take data and attach it to mapping, it opens up all sorts of different opportunities to do different projects. So we don't have a way right now to say, okay, what's the next biggest priority that we should tackle, our GIS department should tackle? How, and part of it's also, how it's organized and where some of its focus can be. But I think the biggest part is some of those opportunities that could add the most value to the residents, right? So some are given, mapping for fire evacuation, order and alert areas, that's great, but now what are some of those other opportunities that we have, and how should the GIS department be set up to meet those potential needs?
Thank you.
Right. Are we able, is local governments allowed to get onto this site, use your site?
The public web map. Yes, there is a public web map which you can go on, and a lot of realtors use it because they can go look at properties and or anybody who it doesn't list the names of the owners of the properties. So it doesn't have that information for privacy reasons. But that web map is available publicly.
Do you do any LiDAR involved in this?
Not directly. I think they have done some LiDAR work, but I don't know specifically, I mean, you can reach out to our GIS manager and have that conversation with them. But they, have the ability to, I think, match up some LiDAR work to their maps. I think they've done also some, floodplain related work where you can, see potentially where the areas at flood risk are and things like that. So some of that work's been done. And that's one of those opportunities is saying, okay, what should we be focused on, and looking at things like that floodplain mapping or potentially some LiDAR work, maybe in relation to either some development or some other projects.
Is it one of the requirements to do all these in-house, or is it allowed to use like open source map services as well as one of the layers?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a requirement to do it in-house, but it's sort of an expertise and a knowledge that we have in-house, and we're paying staff to do it. So if we were to go externally and hire a consultant, they would charge 2 or 3 times what we pay
We use GIS even in like our RDCK owned and operated water systems per se, things like that, where everything is mapped out. That we need to be, our staff needs to be able to have to detect leaks and things like that.
Yeah. So lots of uses in the district for GIS. Building inspection, S103. So a 26% taxation increase this year. A lot of that is driven by permit revenue has softened considerably. So last year we had $950,000 in the budget. We did not achieve that. That permit activity was reduced quite a bit. So the actual was about 636. Because of that, we removed 2 open building inspection positions from the budget. So the original budget, I think, was about 1.4, so we reduced it to about 1.1, while building permit activity remains low. Some of the work that we do on an ongoing basis is staying current with revisions to the BC building code, as well as some new accounting standards may impact how we recognize building permit revenue going forward.
And those 2 positions had not yet been hired. So we didn't lose 2 staff members, we just hadn't hired, they were budgeted to be hired, and then.
So if they were hired, the increase would be more than 26%.
Yes, if we kept them in the budget, we'd be looking at 40-something%.
Just looking at the budgets from 23, 24, the increase is like probably 20% every year. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Just like what? It was 38,000 per hour in district.
Yeah.
23, 48,000, 24. Now it's 64,000 projected for 25. I wonder, why is it so continuous increase by 20% every year?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So part of that is those years had fairly large permit fees. So right after COVID, so 2020, I think, was definitely a down year. Now we have all this new money in the economy, and everybody's doing renovations or building homes, and permit fees are based on a percentage of the home value and building more expensive homes. So there was a considerable increase in revenues, which allowed us to keep permit tax requisitions down. But also what was going on back then, we were understaffed. So there was lots of the crew we had was very challenged to keep up with their inspections. So we hired additional staff. We had some staff leave. We had 2 open positions. So now we're not hiring those 2 back. So it was a combination of lots of activity, not enough staff and we had a fair bit of turnover, I think 23 to 24 in our department. And so probably not enough staff to meet that. So there was a mismatch between revenue and costs. And now revenues come way up, and now we're seeing those increases flow through.
How many building inspectors?
Six for me,
6,
in 3.5 years.
6 different ones.
It's a,
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So
Sorry.
so
Where is it, 6 different ones in 3.5 years?
Yeah.
Oh, I see, oh.
yeah. And then some of that might have been, if one of them was aware, whoever was or wasn't in the cusp, that means somebody from Nelson.
this was basically, they were here for a while and then they're gone and his boss showed up.
Yeah,
And then he was gone and then we got somebody in temporarily and I really liked him and he retired the bugger. And then we got another fellow in and Dan and he was promoted and then we got the last guy, Steve, and he turned out to be good to deal with, but for 3,
And Steve does not live here.
no.
Steve actually has to travel in as well. We haven't been able to secure a building inspector who lives here, like, since we've had 8-7 retire. So,
okay, yeah, that's what I thought, you got somebody traveling
You
here.
can't find a place to live, or what's the deal?
the last one, not Steve, the one prior, Steve didn't, or was it Steve, possibly his wife didn't want to live here. I think that was the case, and it was just not the right fit to live here, and was instead traveling back and forth. And there's a shortage of building inspectors province-wide. So if anybody wants to become a building inspector, then go for it. You have your ticket?
Yeah. And then we have an office here when it is staffed, otherwise, they're traveling, and then we have an office in Creston, who provides building inspection services for, rural areas, surrounding Creston. And Creston's been fairly busy as well in the last couple of years. Okay. Planning and land use, this is area K only, so just the rural area. So this planning department is responsible for administration of zoning, land use, and development applications, working on long-term community plans when those processes are in place, and administrating those bylaw standards and policies. So it's seeing an 18% taxation increase this year. They're receiving some provincial funding to address some new housing regulations and working on a few other initiatives.
And this is just area K,
Just area K.
like long-term community plans. These little communities, does their plans?
Well, you show electoral area. So I think area I is going through that process, or has been going through that process over the last little while. And fairly involved in lots of participation from residents. Like, I think some of the meetings have upwards of 100 people. So lots of people with a fair bit of engagement in that process. So resource recovery, which is basically, for the most part, waste management, but also includes recycling and organics. So the regional district is divided into 3 different resource recovery services, east, central, and west. Nakusp and K are part of west, so that's from Nakusp through the Slocan Valley and up to Nakusp and area K, and includes transfer stations, recycling depots, landfills, as well as the transportation of materials. So this service is seeing an 8% taxation and 10% tipping fee increase. Change to contaminated wood waste management coming this year. West Transfer Station upgrades are nearly complete, including the one in Nakusp and I believe Roseberry. What we talked a bit about before, the Nakusp landfill closure planning is underway. From what I understand, it's not going to be a complete closure. I think there's still going to be some materials accepted here, appliances, steel, and maybe a few other things, metals. So the phase one of legacy landfill assessments is underway as well. So the regional district is responsible for a group, I think about a half dozen landfills that actually were closed, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And we now have to go do assessments and make sure they're not affecting the environment. So we're starting those assessments. Organics diversion initiatives continue, some planning at the Udishenia landfill, and then some procurement for eco depots. Just I can talk a bit about diversion and landfills. So it's really important to put as little organic or as little material as you can in your landfills, but organics are especially harmful in a landfill because as they compose, they leach, and they leach through whatever other materials into the soil and into wherever, into the water table. So we have opened two composting facilities, one in Creston and the other one in Salmo. So those services don't pay for themselves, but they are costed through the larger waste management services. So that's the picture on the upper right is the Salmo Organics facility, composting facility. And on the bottom right is the closure of a full cell at the Creston landfill. So basically it's a portion of the landfill, we call it a cell, it's full of material. Well, we're not just done then. So we have to go through regulation and for waste management, a process of covering that with multiple layers of different types of soil, perforated pipe for any gases that are produced through composting, and so they're captured and safely removed. And then as well as there's that membrane, that's a biosynthetic membrane that's put on there to keep rain from getting into the landfill materials so it doesn't cause leachate issues. So this is the really expensive part of running a landfill, is doing all this engineered type of work here and closing it. And it's not only to keep water out of it, the other part is to keep animals and other pests out of that landfill, otherwise they're gonna go dig it up and do whatever. So a bunch of different regulations around both running a landfill and closing a landfill. And then for a number of years, many years after that, you have to monitor that cell to make sure that, again, it's not behaving the ways it shouldn't be behaving.
So this would be the same procedure you would see in the customer?
I would think that this would be very similar to what they'll have to do in the cusp is this. And then once they put that final layer of soil on, I believe they actually hydroseed it or plant some grass or do something.
And actually, you'd be able to put a house in there and do
There's probably a rule against that.
So there's, you
Use
could have
gas.
the heating.
I think, I don't know if you've seen gas stations that have closed, those sites sit empty for years and years, but yeah.
Is Preston, do they have a landfill or they close that one?
No, that one's operational.
So we only got two landfills.
We've got two operational landfills, or will, so Nakusp still is, but after sometime next year, we'll have Udishenia and Creston as the two operating landfills.
I don't understand why we're closing this one.
Because of the high cost of operating. It's less expensive to haul the waste to Castlegar than it is to run this landfill.
So you're saying that the money figure is more important than the environment, and you start moving it back and forth.
I don't know how much of that was factored into that equation. It was certainly, what I understand, was considered. But yeah.
You're gonna get electric haulers, right?
No,
I'm just yanking you.
Okay.
Well, operating a landfill also is emitting GHGs every single day. And yeah, and so trucking it, all of the measurements that were taken at the time to keep it open or it was at end of life, and so expanding it means really expensive leachate liners, which we do not have there at this point in time. And so the idea was that instead of expanding this site, it made more sense to regionalize it and expand the Udashenia site. And then the trucking, the shipment, all of those measurements were actually weighed into the, and yes, over time, environmental, all of that stuff too, but there's still always environmental going on. And the idea is that we can reduce our garbage and reduce organics at some point in time, that would be a great feat. Even our transfer stations in Area K at Edgewood and Burton, those they have less organics in those transfer stations just simply because rural people, they compost. And so it's interesting how much, there's so many different, it's like just, going back to school just to sit on the resource recovery committee meeting and just try to absorb all of the years.
What do you mean by organics? Because when you say organics, I'm thinking organic food.
No,
Any kind of
food.
food.
I mean, the
Why
idea.
aren't people throwing food in the garbage?
Well, people throw food in the garbage.
They shouldn't be.
Not everybody composts, as we know,
Or has the ability.
Can you-
or has the ability to compost. The other piece of organics, like these larger scale organics, they can actually take bones and all of the things that you would not be putting in your household compost anyways, more or less, it'd be unlikely.
I use a special product. If there's bones, I can just sprinkle this product.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So, I'll divert, I understand what you're saying. I have family in Denmark, so she's been there 60 years. She tells me all the time of all the incredible things they do with garbage. It just breaks my heart every time I see all this space and we're doing it. They burn it. They burn all their plastic in a special, send someone over to Denmark and check it out.
So that question was asked, so the incineration. So the sort of the industrial side incineration facilities are really, really expensive. So we've, from what I understand, and looked into it. And we actually don't produce enough garbage to make one economically feasible.
Wait a minute, we're talking Denmark, it's small.
No, but the regional district is way smaller than that.
Okay, so you could talk about an overall general
We're
possibility?
talking about population.
Anyway, I'm gonna interrupt, you keep talking.
Yeah, so, but that's sort of the industrial scale. So who has incinerators in BC? I think there's one maybe like in Delta or Vancouver somewhere. I don't even think like Kamloops or Kelowna, who's like, 3 times the size of the regional district in a much smaller area, don't incinerate their garbage. There is talk out there of some new technology that's coming, that you can do incineration on a smaller scale. The challenge with incineration is capturing all the pollutants that come out of it. So industrial scale incinerators got to have the most expensive parts, all these scrubbers and things to make sure toxins aren't released in the environment. So there are companies working on smaller scale incinerators, but they're not there yet. So I don't know, maybe in 10 years our whole model changes and we're not having to haul garbage, or there's some other way to deal with it.
Was it 2030, we're supposed to be 0%? I can't remember.
Zero for what, organics or?
Waste.
Oh, waste, oh, okay.
2030, I think it's
Not there.
But we've got to keep looking at, we talk about hauling, we've got to try to cut down on the hauling pumps. So composting, grinding, Denver's got a neat little system that they put each little block area, they have little committees in each block, and they have these turn things, and they take their compost and they put it there, they grind it, turn it, and once it's full, they turn it, put it into another one, and once that's full, they can take it to another compost place where they make soil. And actually, New Denver and Silverton,
Wow,
RDCK is saying that they would like to use this as a model.
that's awesome.
They also have a lot of volunteers.
It's volunteer,
If something like that, I'd be volunteering.
but it's, you're looking after your little block area, which is, pretty simple. And the school is on board too in New Denver.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So they've got a great, bigger one.
yeah.
Yeah, and then I live in the city of Nelson, so the city of Nelson's done has got what's called these food cyclers, and it's an appliance you put in your kitchen or wherever in your house, and you dump your food waste in there. And it basically dehydrates it, chops it up, and you come up with this handful of this brown material. So it's not composted. But it's much smaller now. You go from something this big that's all wet and potentially, if you don't have a place to compost, you now have this much material. It's dry and easier or more cost effective to transport. The issue is now everybody's got the $700 unit in their house. They don't last forever, and I believe the city of Nelson received a whole bunch of grant funding to buy the first, 500 or 1,000 of them. And so they're reviewing the economics of that program. So I have one in my house. I like it. I think it's great. But I'm not sure about the economics of the whole program, how it's going to work out in the long term.
The compost, when you put it in a bag, it's probably 2/3 heavier than your normal garbage. Just the weight of it.
Oh, gosh, yeah. I put out my garbage every 4 months
Yeah.
on the street.
Yeah, and compost is mainly water, or a lot of water.
And the sad part is you're hauling it, and actually it breaks down into soil, so
Mhm.
it doesn't make sense to put it in a landfill.
Mhm.
All my soil is home. Anyway, just
Yeah.
get on.
Right. So, lots.
Go ahead.
So,
The question about the landfill in general.
mhm.
I've been told that businesses from Nakusp are not able to recycle the plastics. They're not able to dispose any of their recycles in local landfill. Is that correct information?
I'm not sure about that.
It depends on what you're talking about. So basically, anybody can go to the recycling and take the things that the village does not pick up. So the village has their service of pickup. That doesn't include plastic bags. It doesn't include glass. I guess for the reasons of the going out in blue bins, there's got to be reasons for that municipalities don't.
I've been told move the bags.
Yeah.
I work for one of the businesses in town.
Okay.
And when I do our recycling, they only accept cardboard. And if it's plastic or metal cans from, let's say kitchen,
Doesn't make sense.
it says it's only for household. And the businesses has to.
So that's something to do with the village. That would not be anything to do with regional districts. So if they wanted to actually physically take that to the recycling, those things are recyclable. So there isn't anything barring businesses from taking their recycling to our recycling depot, as far as I know. But
No, the recycling employee has around.
they turn you around.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe, yeah.
We can look into
Yeah.
it.
They can take a picture after we are violating the rule.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it'd be
So
interesting.
basically they told me I have two options. I have to take it somewhere out of town and they accept it,
Uh-huh.
or I can landfill it. Which is not a financial problem for us as a business, but
Okay.
it's not environmentally right to landfill all the plastics, right? That's why the landfill is so cool, because many people are forced to do.
Yeah.
I wonder what kind of plastic.
I think,
We
yeah.
can't use this yellow container as a business, because it's only there for households, not for businesses. This is what we've been told.
Oh, is this to do with not the ICI? No.
I think maybe like cardboard I could see, because some businesses will
Mhm.
bring in truckloads of cardboard, and that I could see being done separately, but
It's a separate place for businesses cardboard.
I think
So
so.
this is all good,
Yeah.
but then there's only one container for plastics and metal cans.
Okay.
And this is.
Plastics and metal cans.
They pretty well have to have their own bin, and they literally got to either haul it to Oceania.
Well, is that like Canco is their own bin? probably.
If you go to Foxville, they have their own bin there. Full top, they got
But
their
this is not recycles, this is,
Yeah, this is recycling.
this is landfill. So we have one of those as well, but we want to do the things right, separate our plastics and metal. It's easier to like landfill, and it's even cheaper,
I think
but we don't want to do it.
I would say that it would be best if you got in touch with our staff on that, because I would like to understand that myself.
I was told that too, that
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
Yes.
It could go to the landfill.
You can go to landfill,
Yeah.
yeah, but this is not the solution we want to accept.
It's only landfill now.
Because I don't know what's the difference between households and businesses, because businesses pays the same tax or even more taxes.
Yes,
Yeah,
but some businesses for recycling will generate massive, so recycling is subsidized, is a subsidized service. So some businesses will generate massive amounts of recycling, it's like some businesses like cardboard, for instance. So I think there's a special sort of program for that, but I'm not sure about plastics and cans, like, so these are non-refundable cans, right? So, I don't know, soup cans or whatever.
Whatever you put to this blue bin at
Yeah.
home,
Yeah,
it's okay for houses, but not
okay,
for some.
all right, we'll have a look at it.
And our village are not gonna be picking it up.
All right, is it going to be picking it up?
Not in the commercial.
And then they contacted the company who is running the recycling program here in Nakusp, if they can provide the container at our facility, so we can pay for it, but there is no such option. So basically, legally, businesses are left with the options or forced to landfill everything, which is okay to pay for. It's not a matter of money, it's just a matter of how to do the things right. So you can either landfill it, or you have to take it out. To maybe as far as Nelson, Nakusp, or maybe so accept it, but it's
what's wrong to do that?
yeah.
So that's provincial, so that restriction, so I'd like to know.
Yeah, and who knows, there might be something there.
There's other opportunities called Eco Depot. Those are DCK would like to bring here too. The Nelson Leafs, you know how every year at our arenas, we bring all our paint,
Yes.
TVs and stuff. So actually, I was talking to Amy Wilson the other day, they would like to put an Eco Depot here.
Yeah, and that's on the bottom thing there.
And they were even talking about reuse, materials. Say you've got an old door that you don't want to throw in the dump, you can bring it to maybe a reuse place. So we got to really think outside the box.
All right, let's go on to what's next.
I'm just mindful of your time, yeah.
Yeah, I'm good.
You have to drive home.
I'm I'm already here. I'm picked whatever time we need. So.
Actually, this is the longest we've ever had a meeting.
Oh, really? It's because you keep asking questions. Okay, so we talked a bit about it before. So Service 223, the recreation facility or the Nakusp District Sports Complex. I'm sure you're all aware of the squash courts, curling rink, auditorium, and arena. So there's a joint service commission with Area K and Council of Village Nakusp that's involved in this facility, and we're seeing a 3% taxation increase in 2025 for this service. Okay. And then there's a Recreation Commission, Service S228, largely a grant funding service. So there's a 0% taxation increase this year to $28,000 total taxation and $24,000 in grants planned for 2025. A few examples of typical grants are the Music in the Park, and numerous community clubs and associations, including Burton, Edgewood, and Fauquier.
So the 24,000 covers that for
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
A little bit about parks, regional parks. So the closest regional park to Nakusp and Area K is in Roseberry. There's a trail in the parks there. So the regional district is working on a regional parks strategy, including parks, trails, and water access to set some priorities for coming years and future direction. So that completion is coming in fall 2025.
We do not actually pay into regional parks in our area here because we do not have any regional parks in our area. All of our parks and trails are operated by tenure holders of societies. So, and it is something that we have such a small population that in order for any of those to ever be taken over, that it would be quite a costly, quite a costly service to us.
So you said, isn't the McDonald Creek Park a regional park?
McDonald Creek, that's provincial.
Provincial park.
So we do have provincial parks and we have parks and rec, parks, like camping sites, rec sites and trails.
They're like a Nakusp Trail Society.
Nakusp Trail Society, Wensley Creek Cross Country Ski,
What's Mount Gabriel?
Gabriel is, yeah, at NABS, Nakusp Area Bike Society. Mm-hmm. And it's actually provincial, like they have parks and rec, campsite, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so this work here, if there was the potential for some a regional or skate park in the future, this work here would set sort of some of the guidelines regarding how that might happen. So that's why it's mentioned in this presentation. So library, museum, and archive. So these three services, the big impact on it in the coming year, the budget is the building requires a substantial increase in its lease for cover the operating costs related to the building, including maintenance. So each one of these three services saw a $6,000 increase in requisition related to that. So for the library, smaller overall percentage increase because it's over $100,000 in requisition, but the museum and the historical archives saw larger increases because they were closer to $20,000 in taxation. Water utilities, so there's only one listed here. There's actually a couple more in the area, part of this presentation. So Fauquier Water, 10% parcel, 10% user, fee increase mainly to fund future projects. There's a pilot treatment plant technology being piloted this year, and then some engineering and permitting work for water line replacement plan for 2026 and beyond.
What is the rate for water in Tokyo?
You don't want to know.
Yeah, a lot more than the best.
A lot more than the Nakusp. It's a small population. The water systems are quite expensive to operate.
Especially rural systems. Yeah.
Small population.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And not as dense.
Yeah.
Okay. Emergency planning. So we have a larger emergency planning department, and then that is allocated, those costs are allocated out to the numerous sort of regional emergency planning services. So for Nakusp and K, it's service S159. So that service is seeing an 8% taxation increase this coming year. Again, the large focus in that department has been implementation of the new Emergency and Disaster Management Act, or otherwise known as EMBA. So redoing, reworking emergency plans, risk assessments, business continuity plans, as well as more of a multi-jurisdictional focus, and aligning bylaw, policy procedures and templates, and expanding the neighborhood emergency preparedness program. Also increasing emergency support services capacity, emergency preparedness fund grants are on the way, and $230,000 CBT community readiness grant. As many of you are aware, there was several large wildfire events last year up around Argenta and the Slocan Valley. So there was a post-season reviews done, and so we'll be implementing those recommendations this year. And then as well, this service looks after fire smart programs, including rebates, neighborhood recognition, and CWRP updates, which are funded through the EBCM Fire Smart program.
Is there any funding for ESS, or is it all volunteer?
There's some grant funding there. We do have some ESS employees, but I'm not the one to speak to about what sort of services they offer. I mean, they usually activate when there's an event going on, and then they'll set up those support services for I know it's like alternate accommodation, food, and all those other things. So the upper right-hand photo is a picture of our activated emergency operations system during last year's, I believe, wildfire season. So anytime, and the province largely reimburses the costs of running that EOC when it's activated when the event's going on, but they're particular what they cover. So they don't cover, for instance, our staff's benefits. So what will happen during EOC activation, we'll have like finance, resource recovery, planning, and other staff will move into the EOC and work in the EOC to help run the responses for those events. And the bottom is a picture of, I believe, an evacuation center, not in our area. Uh, 911 communications. The regional district is responsible for contracting out 911 services for much of the regional district except the larger municipalities. So it's seeing a 28% increase in taxation. A lot of this is driven by the increase in contracted service costs for the two dispatch centers that we contract out. One is 911, so that's when we call 911. You generally will get dispatched to Kelowna, and if it's a fire-related call, it gets dispatched to fire dispatch in Prince George. And then as well, this service seeing some increase costs to migrating to next gen 911 and some replacement of radio infrastructure, including repeaters, which is to be funded by reserve. So regional district does not run the call centers itself, but contracts it out, and is responsible for some hardware upgrades. Fire protection, so service S139, 3% taxation increase for the residents of Area K. So the budgets per contract to the village is Slocan, which provides fire protection services for a defined portion of Area K. There's probably signs that say when you're leaving the fire protection district, when the three directions leaving Nakusp.
Never seen that.
You haven't seen the signs?
Yeah. You see it? Like, you get to Helsinki, and it'll say,
Yeah.
let's see it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Transit service S239. So the regional district has in the west part, I think 3 different transit services. And so some region-wide initiatives. So last year, through an external grant, we had an outside consultant come in and do a value study, interviewing all the directors and various other staff. So that study is going to drive a reapportionment plan. So what we have is a really complicated cost allocation model for transit services right now that's often difficult to understand. In some areas isn't fair. So some areas are overpaying, some are underpaying. So it's going to be this plan or the studies come up with several proposals and to a fair system. And as well, a service level review will begin this year to drive potential changes for 2026. So BC Transit is contracted to provide the transit services, but it's, for instance, it's too late now to change anything for 2025. So there's a meeting, I believe, in April where they're going to discuss that transit reapportionment plan, as well as any potential service changes for 2026. And as well, we've requested a service fare review by BC Transit. So we, for the most part, any changes to transit level services or routes or fares, we make that request to BC Transit, and they either provide us options or make suggestions. The RECK does not sort of directly make changes and, oh, cancel that bus or do this and have it happen automatically. It usually takes about a year for any changes that we request to flow through BC Transit. So this service and other transit services are seeing a fairly large increase. That's 35% taxation. That's driven by a few things. During COVID, the provincial government, the federal as well, threw a whole bunch of money at transit because less people on the buses, but we don't want these buses to go away. So for a number of years, we had a substantial amount of reserves that we used to reduce taxation. Those are largely drying up or have dried up. And as well as the cost of operating buses, the service has gone up quite a bit, depending on the contractor. The cost of buses has gone up. Fuel's gone up, so that's reflected in that increase. And again, so reserves are, so I think there's a little bit of reserves left in this service. They'll be mostly used up this year. And as I talked about, an operating cost increase with BC Transit.
Where's dispatch for all these? So their main center,
Is it? I'm not sure if it's trail or is it? I'm not sure if BC Transit does dispatch. There used to be. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure about. Yeah.
I think we did use up this, we used up the surplus last year.
No, there's still some in this service. In the other service, we used up the surplus.
Okay.
And S239 has about 100, I think 40,000 left, and most of that's going to be used up this year. Yes.
This is on the side to these units and that and going green. Don't know if you're aware of a company called Edison Motors. They
Out of Merit?
Out of Merit, they're now out of Golden, and they're basically retrofitting trucks with a gen set and battery power. And they're working on logging trucks that can regen as they come out of the bush loaded. And they run the batteries to a certain point with controllers, and then the gen set fires right up full bore, screams away until the batteries are fully charged up. In the meantime, it's rolling. It's quite interesting. They're on YouTube. But they're doing 5-ton trucks. They're now also doing pickups. What all that involved, because they're buying a lot of stuff from China. So,
Yeah.
but that is something that's out there, and that's kind of interesting as opposed to a full electric vehicles.
Yeah. So full electric has some challenges when, especially, a bus needs to run all day from 6 in the morning till 8 at night. You can't have a battery large enough to do that. And then overnight's not enough time to recharge it.
And it's cold.
Yeah, and it's cold.
There's also the issue, this is where this hybrid, they're having some really good results. But it's new, it's...
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. And that's kind of, I can see the a logging truck because it's way up on the mountain and it's got a,
Yeah, it goes up empty.
and so low, that's gonna generate a lot of energy to,
We're doing experiments on that. Yeah, the battery's full up by the time we get down on the flat.
yeah.
So we don't have to run the genset, so the fuel costs are down. And he says if you get the right generator set up, you need 120, 10 volts, you need 220 volts, and you're both down the road, as long as the genset's working, you got all the power.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, but it's Edison Motors, and just go on YouTube and,
So they moved to Golden.
yeah, they got a big, just out by Dawn, they bought a big section in there so that we can have a test track
Mhm.
and stuff like that, and there's no zoning and planning in that area.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
One more question.
Sure.
I'm not using buses
Mhm.
almost never.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't know what's, is there any increase in the fares as well? Like how much people pay for tickets?
I was gonna say, we're doing a review, or a request to BC Transit for review of fares, but fares makes up, there's the cost recovery on fares for transit is next to nothing. Fares are very, very small.
Really cheap to go to Nelson.
How much?
$4.
Or
No,
that,
that's
or
not-
that. I use it all the time.
Mhm.
But I think, yeah, but I wanted to highlight too, because I've been pushing a step of West Transit Committee as a service review. I mean, I grew up in Ottawa, fantastic transit system, so I love the idea of transit, but like, if we look at the financial plan over the next 5 years, our costs, the requisition, like the tax costs are gonna double, more or less, which is a lot to take. And if you look at, if you remember from one of the first slides, there's the arena and then transit's number 2. But it's not that I don't want transit or that we shouldn't have transit, it's just, I think we need a philosophical conversation about what's the value, what are we willing to invest in it, and what are we getting for it? Especially in a region like ours where Nakusp or Edgewood, I mean, is it 2 people to take the bus or is it 2,000 people? to take the
Yeah,
bus?
tons of people take it. Tons.
Mhm.
Have you ridden on it? Just
No.
curious. Have you?
No, but I mean, I know that they do from here. I know that Edgewood also, their bus on Fridays, they have quite a good little crew that comes over. It's just, it's such a great distance that they have to travel, so the cost is in the distance. And then the ridership has fluctuated a lot over the years.
Well, please do ride on it before you make any decisions. A lot of people that take the bus down the valley haven't got hardly any nickel in their pocket. So they're relying on it for a low-cost fare. They
Absolutely.
really are relying on it.
No, I know the value of transit.
If you,
Some of them don't have a chance to drive the car anymore.
they can't afford the car.
Yeah, and it doesn't service our rural areas as much as, you know, we wish it could. It's just feasibly, it's just so darn expensive to do that. It'd be, you know, so involved in a service review is also, you know, trying to, you know, push the envelope on what else could be done to service, you know, these rural areas more efficiently somehow. I don't know how that will ever work.
There are different models of service delivery as well.
Please tread carefully.
We won't ever, I don't think we'll ever lose that service. I don't think that's ever the idea. The idea is how do we make it more efficient? That's all.
Yeah, but I think that there's a key element that somehow a lot of times gets lost in a service review, and that is the concept of equity, not equal treatment.
That's what we talk a lot
And then
about.
societal value for that service that you're providing.
That is-
So if you do engage in a service review, I would hope that you would make sure that that is included in the criteria
That's
for.
always part of the conversation, believe me, yes.
And that value study was exactly that, to bring that to the forefront. Here's the values for transit that are more than just moving somebody at what cost, right? There's lots of reasons on transit, as we talked about. That, you know, it's not only affordability, it's the ability to drive. There's people who need to get medical appointments, but they can't drive. So there's lots of reasons.
I just think when I'm listening to this leader's comments, there are a lot of people that do need that service.
Yeah.
So I would hate to see, you know, I don't use it. I don't have to use it.
Well, we can afford it.
But I very much support Any taxation that I have goes towards supporting that service. So,
Friends, when I did an exchange to Australia in 2000, the one fellow would go on the bus to Nelson because his wife was working in the school. He called it the magical mystery tour. And it just brings you such a great sense of community. Sitting beside people I knew when I lived in Denver, it has incredible benefits, but you don't put a price tag to it. So thank you, I appreciate your endorsement, I really do.
Critical, your annual donation is well received.
All right, so I think we're on to the pie charts. So for the village in Nakusp, somebody, a property owner in Nakusp, so this is where the RDCA portion of their tax bill goes. So the pie chart on the right, the arena, a good chunk of it, transit, so that's more or less probably 30-35%. Transit, and the library and waste about 15%. And then about 10 other services, somewhere less than 10%. But that gives a good visual representation where regional district portion of the Nakusp residence taxes go. And then sort of the math we talked about. So per $250,000 of home value, it's about a $360 tax bill. And if your home's worth 500, you multiply by 2, 750, you multiply by 3. Okay, do you have a question or?
So there's two grants, there's a homeowner's grant and there's over 65.
Mm-hmm.
Does the provincial government pay that?
Yes.
To the regional district?
The provincial government pays that, so we get the regional district gets the full funding. The provincial government does the grants.
Mhm.
The provincial government also does what's called the tax deferral, so you can sign up for tax deferrals, I think, if you're 55 or older. And so then the provincial government administers that as well. So the regional district gets its full funding. If somebody decides for whatever reason is unable or decides not to pay their taxes, the regional district gets its full funding, and then the provincial government does their thing to recover those funds. But all sounds great for the regional district, but there's a fee. The provincial government also takes their cut on the taxes. I should say not their cut. They add. They have an additional fee that they charge us for processing taxes. Okay, so let's go to Nakusp. Let's see who's next.
I got a question back.
Sure. Yeah, we can go back.
At the ski hill, isn't that area H, and how does it come into area K? On the ski hill, Summit Lake there?
Yeah, the ski hill is in Area H, operated by Society from Area K,
Okay,
and then we all share it with the village of New Denver, Silverton, Nakusp, Area K, Area H. We all pay that $20,000 requisition together.
Okay. There you go. So area K, so somebody define area K who gets fire protection from the village of Nakusp. So now about 20% of the bill is fire protection. The arena, again, making up 35 to 40%. And then the rest, around 10% or less amongst the other services. So once again, this presentation will be available tomorrow on the webpage for this meeting. So now somebody in Edgewood, so not paying into the arena or fire or Nelson and Nakusp Fire. So street lighting, building inspection, planning, waste, and rural admin make up a good portion of the tax bill, but street lighting about Yeah, 40%.
And our street lighting in Edgewood went up as well,
Did it?
quite a bit.
Okay, from last year?
From last year, and I was gonna ask our staff why,
Okay.
you know.
I don't know, but, yeah, reach out to staff. Let's see, area,
Yes, 171.
area K.
The street lighting.
Street lighting in Edgewood, well, 6,700 to 9,600, so
Yeah,
a big percentage increase, $3,000.
yeah. It's just interesting that, where did that happen? Was that because of, you know, raising hydro rates or
Or replacement of
replacement of bulb?
or
Yeah.
things like that, or wiring, I don't know. Good question, but
But they pay a lot more for their house insurance in Edgewood, so they have very low taxation, but they pay very low.
okay, so there's fire brigade, makes up about, almost 25%. They have a recreation hall, and then, real admin is another good portion of their tax bill. And then, some smaller services after that.
Folk here has fire hydrants, right?
Yeah, which,
Fire hydrants?
Focure does have, they do have fire hydrants, they're put in by BC Hydro.
So they would have a drink in their home insurance.
I don't, maybe a bit, because it's a fire brigade and it's not a,
They're just a level 2, they just get a little bit.
yeah, not the full discount that somebody has, that has a full fire protection service. And Burton, so some money for the Burton Hall, so fairly low tax bill, paying into waste. Some emergency planning services planning, some of those smaller services start making up a larger portion of their tax bill because they don't have a lot of other specific services. And that's it for the presentation. So any other questions?
That was an excellent presentation.
Was it? Oh, okay, thank you, appreciate that.
Very good, very detailed,
Mhm.
and you've got a great deal of knowledge there, so well done.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Yeah.
So, to do with the Centennial Building, there's 3 societies that face it from the village.
Yeah.
And they all get a regional district grant in aid, I think.
Yes, Dawn, we did put that through.
So I notice you have 2 fees, a general administration fee and a community service fee. And is that sort of just for writing a check to those organizations, or what's the purpose of that?
Yeah, it's more than, yeah, writing the check might be the, but to get that check written involves a fair bit of work and a fair bit of discussion. So I think it's, there's sort of a minimum amount that gets charged for any service, because in the background, so even for these services required, we had a meeting where I know we had 4 or 5 regional district staff at, finance staff, CAO, because now you're involving sort of, there's questions around sort of the logistics and different ways of dealing with it. There's finance questions. We have directors. So yes, it looks like it's just writing a check, but there's a lot of staff time involved in making some of these things happen.
All the financial grant aids, there's a service fee to run the tax roll through, and to pay back to giving tax money.
And that's actually a requirement of the Local Government Act, that each service gets some portion of overhead. They can't just, they're not free to so I think, yeah.
It doesn't seem to be a percentage, it seems to be the same fee.
Yeah, it's a flat fee. So I think we decided or the decision was made that at a very minimum, $900 or whatever, it's, I think, approaching 1,000 now, is what every service would be charged for administrative fee.
The two of them are roughly 1,600.
Is it? Yeah. And any service that has sort of that community service perspective will see that a community service fee, because our community service department is involved in sort of helping out and managing those budgets as well, because they look after all we pay into 6 different libraries, and so our community services department holds all the knowledge around libraries, how they operate, and is able to read they submit reports, is able to read those reports and understand them, and help make recommendations around budgets.
Can you tell me where the defined area K boundaries are?
Does it shift depending on the service?
Yeah, so it's actually either, well, yeah, it depends on which service, but, I end of Idler Road is, or does it go all the way to,
But is it different for
yeah,
fire versus
different for
library?
Fire versus library, so, an arena is the
different
same
too.
as library, I think, so, and then it goes all the way to Hopkins and all the way before the residents in Summit. We don't have any resident out that way, but if we did, that's how far it would go. And then, yeah, somewhere in the Idler Road area, so past at the end of Idler Road is that cutoff. And then another one of the service, like the fire service only goes to Bayview. So as opposed to.
Yeah. So if you look at these sheets for Area K and the defined areas, they're all different except for the 3 that are the same are museum, the archive, and I believe where's the library? Oh, the library is different than the museum and the archive. So the only 2 that are exactly the same are the museum and the archive.
And when I requested maps on them, they're very old and they don't have a lot of details on them. So there's no somewhere we've got the actual addresses of the cutoff, but.
Yeah, that's all.
I think there's a GIS.
Yeah, I'm sure I could contact your GIS.
Well, I think with respect to the GIS, there's in terms of the service delivered, and I'm chair of the library board, so I'll use that as an example. We provide service for people well outside of our defined area, including Edgewood, Fokey. We only go down to basically the Arrow Lake Ferry is my understanding. So, Tracy, you could correct me if I'm wrong with that, but that's, I believe, where we go. But we still provide service, and we don't recoup the full cost of that, because what we do is charge our membership fee, and we try to keep that as low as we can. And that's from my earlier comments related to the whole piece around equity. You know, that people should have access to these types of services. And it's the same thing. We service people in Hills and New Denver, and sometimes even beyond in some of those areas as well. So, I guess my point is that, you know, a lot of these organizations or services that are being provide much more than those defined areas.
Yeah, and that discussion comes up quite a bit with a lot of those sort of the centralized services, even in other areas, recreation facilities. Your tax base is here, but people that live 1 inch out of that tax area come and use those services. What's the fair and equitable approach to that? And there's all kinds of pros and cons of how to approach it. So.
Yeah. And as we enter into ready grant season, we know that, you know, societies also have a large service area, even if they're, you know, a lot of people think, you know, maybe community services is just the village of Nakusp, but community services offers, you know, a broad service to all of it as well. So, not something we pay taxes on, but it's something we vote on during ready grant season.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. You're very welcome. Thank you, everyone. Sure. Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm doing my thing anyway. Because I'm watching what's going on down south in the States and realizing that somebody's pretty ticked off at the I'll say the word, but I'm not sure it's appropriate, waste of public funds that often happens where, gazillion people are hired and people say, we've got all this money, oh my God, let's spend it. So, my concern is that we don't get to that place in Canada, that we treat whatever is we receive, like with your RDCK, with respect, and honor the fact that we did our best not to make it a hardship for people, to make it as best as we can, because everybody's hurting. So I'd rather not see it to the point where we just look at, well, that's, my best example is a grant. You apply for a grant. Well, a lot of people think of grants free money. It's taxpayers that put it forward. So treat it with respect and let's get to the point. And I guess where I'm coming from is my job was a home ec teacher, and I was given a budget, and I had to stay within that budget. And I'm proud of the fact that I did stay in it, and I bought locally from the farmers market, and I did everything I could to accommodate what I was given. So I just wanted to present that.
Okay, no, very, very good comment. Yeah.
Yeah, and talking even a lot about, the latest purchase was the purchase that was a machinery, vehicle type of machine.
Compacting truck.
Compacting truck, and we were able to, find Kate, she's really great because, you know, there was lots of competition, but actually the Canadian price even won too, so that was good.
That feels good too, hey?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for your.
Okay, yeah, thank you all very much for coming.